Hey, what's up, everyone? It is now day 17, I think, 16 or 17 of the Path of Exile 2 early access. And I feel like I've played enough now, and I've really taken my time to think about the whole game and the way it is and the way it's going to be and the way that GGG's been treating it. And I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. I've now played for 16 or 17 days, and I have a level 92 Chronomancer. I've fought every boss in the game. Didn't beat the Arbiter of Ash because I died to something that I don't think was very well telegraphed. We'll get to that later. And I yesterday wanted to level through the campaign again, slightly twinked out, just to feel through it. I leveled this Infernalist yesterday. So I feel like I have a pretty good experience in the game. So let's get right into it. Art, sound, environment, direction. The game is gorgeous. Look at this. Look at this. Look at that. Look at this. Game's beautiful. D4 bad. The one thing D4 had, and PoE2 just took it away. In terms of the campaign, Act 1, godlike. Campaign, really, 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 really good. We have 4, 5, and 6 acts coming later. We have 1, 2, 3. You have to go through Cruel again. Act 1, borderline perfect. It's really, really good. Maybe a couple zones that are a little windy. Like I think the farm area is a little weird, but it's not that bad. Act 2, first half, basically fine. I think the hyena boss feels a little hard, but then the dreadnought feels awful. I did play through it again yesterday. It feels way better with the checkpoints, but it still doesn't feel very good. All those little narrow bridges and everything, if you don't have a build that can handle it, feels really bad. Act 3, a lot of PoE1 veterans don't really love Act 3. I thought Act 3 was borderline perfect. Pyramid of Filth area is a little bit wacky. A couple of those zones are a little bit bigger than I would like. But if they tone down some of the crazy winding zones by like 15%, and with some game experience, you can get through it a lot faster. When granted, I was twinked out. I was just like moderately twinked. I didn't have anything like crazy on, but twinked out yesterday. I did beat all 3 acts, the first 3 in about 8 hours, whereas the first time it was like 25 hours. So much, much faster just knowing what you're doing. I really, really like the campaign. I'm excited about acts 4, 5, and 6. Feels really good. Would like to see the base movement speed. I don't think we're going to see this, but I would love to see the base movement speed go up by like 10% or something. Unless you get movement speed boots, the campaign does feel... I didn't get any till like halfway through Act 2 on my first character, and that felt really bad. With no movement abilities at all, I think a little bit of more base movement speed would feel really good. Performance. I think the game performance is really bad. I get decent performance when I'm in my hideout, but then when I go into a map, some of these maps I drop to like 40, 50 FPS. I have a 5950X and a 3080, and I get about 180 FPS sitting in my hideout. You can see as soon as I click and as soon as I start casting some sparks, look at that. 180 goes down to 120 just by having these sparks go around. And then when I go into some maps, I can drop down to like 35, 40 FPS. And with not that much on the screen, honestly, I think I would really, really, really like them to take a look at performance. I've updated my drivers. I'm running DLSS on quality, turned off global illumination. I've tried everything. And with my computer, I would really like to see my FPS never drop below 100. I really think with this hardware, it should be able to pull that off. I'd really like to see them focus on that. I'm very sensitive to those FPS drops. And with how unforgiving the game is, which we'll get to later, I think it feels particularly bad to die to lag or just, FPS drops because you couldn't react to, some sort of on-death mechanic. In terms of the combat, I really like the mechanical feel of the combat, and this is going to be the main theme of this video that we get to later. Love the mechanical feel of the combat. I like dodging things. I loved the Viper Nadziri. I don't know if it's Nadziri, Nadzubi, whatever her name is. I actually really, really like that fight. It really encouraged you to take a look at how it worked and look at the telegraphing of things, like dodging around all of the different, the spear attacks and everything. It was very rewarding to learn that fight. Love that combat, that very interactive combat. And I want them, this is the theme of the video, I really want them to focus on that moving forward. And I hope that's something that they really take to heart and try to keep as the soul of the game instead of degenerate PoE1 play. So if you want a little spoiler about where we're going to go, I love using multiple abilities until it gets to the point where this is the main theme of that I've seen people say on Reddit is like monsters are playing PoE1 still. We're playing PoE2. There are the OP builds, but many of these builds. Oh, I love this too. This little blue, the blue over here, like under that. Sorry, I have to gush about the being able to see through the UI. Some people complain about it, but I thought it was gorgeous, like seeing the lighting behind the UI and everything. Anyway, I think the game's beautiful. Monsters are still playing PoE1. They still have all the same modifiers from PoE1. They are running at warp speed. They are Shroud Walker teleporting on top of you. And if you don't have a build that operates basically like PoE1, then you're kind of left in the dust. Like if you are doing your really long windup thing, like most monsters and maps, you get like a juiced rare, particularly if you take the nodes that juice your rares and they have like 4 modifiers, and they're probably going to have Shroudwalker or Hasted or Mana Siphoner and Temporal Rift or Temporal Bubble, and then the worst one, Proximal Tangibility, the new one that they added, which is basically Prox Bubbles but worse. You need a build that's like PoE1 basically. When you're not fighting monsters like that, like particularly through the campaign, you're fighting regular monsters and learning to outplay those shield guys. If you're shooting projectiles at them, dodge rolling behind them and then stunning them and shooting them in the back, and or the guys that you can light on fire and they drop their shields. Those are the guys I think halfway through Act 2, the big guys with shields. You can light them on fire, they'll drop their shields. Like there's actual interactive combat, and unfortunately, when you get to the maps later on, you lose that, and it just turns into PoE1. Also, there are some movement abilities, and if you have a build that can take advantage of it, you have a gigantic leg up on the people that don't. It's not remotely as strong as PoE1, but if you do have a movement ability, because normally you're just like dodge roll is the exact same speed as walking. This just doesn't feel awesome. You're just gonna be walking around normally. And I don't need like, Path of Exile crazy mobility, but you can kind of get it with certain builds. You got Tailwind, you got Blink here, people got Temporalis, they're flying around at the speed of light with their 300% rarity builds. If you're playing a normie build, like, hey, I'm just a regular little Titan trying to do Earthquake or something, you are left in the dust. And that feels really, really bad. Bumping into things, I could talk about like the lack of phasing and all that, but there's got to be something in the middle between like bumping into everything and and just like pressing one button and blowing up 4 screens at once. In terms of the end game, I think the end game is a placeholder. They clearly have only been working on it for a few months, as Jonathan has said, maybe up to 6 months, but not very long. This is relatively new. I can't say anything that other people haven't said already. The Lost Towers are bad. Nodes with no content's really bad. One portal feels really bad. Maps without bosses feels really bad. I think the way that you get points right now is backwards. You can't get points for some of these until you fight the boss. You can't fight the boss until you get the splinters. You don't really get splinters until you have the points. So most people are just going to buy a Breachstone, get the points, buy another Breachstone, get the points, and then they can get the breaches, and then they can fight more bosses, or they can sell the Breachstones. Very backwards in my opinion. I really preferred how we did it in PoE1, where just by doing maps, you could get some points that then would allow you to focus on that content and level it up and do it in a more interesting way. So I hope they look at the way that these points are acquired, at least like the first 2 or 4. Get those early on, like, hey, open 10 breaches, boom, first 2 points. Kill 20 rares in breaches, kill 50 rares in breaches, boom, those are your next 2 points. Then kill the boss, that's your next 2 points. Something like that I think could go a really long way. This content doesn't really come online until you have points into it, and that feels really bad. Like I am level 92 right now. I have made like 1.6 Breachstones total, which is not the worst, but I also have some points. I bought my first Breachstone, and then Deli, I'm level 92. Again, I only have 62 splinters. I've done every single Deli I've seen. 62 splinters. I'm not even 1/3 of the way there at level 92. That's crazy. I think the tuning's off on that. Ritual and Expedition feel really bad. Again, not anything that no one else has said, but I think the tuned down Rod crafting is really, really bad right now. And Ritual, at least without any points into it, feels awful. And it's pure RNG whether you get the points by getting the King in the Mist. So it feels backwards. Don't like it. Strongboxes and Essences feel awful. Not much to say there. They feel really bad. Jonathan said that strongboxes were going to be faster, and they aren't. I hope they look at that again, and that was just a bug or something. Gold feels like a failure. Maybe that's what they want. They want it to be kind of a throwaway thing. It has value in the campaign, and then later on, you can just gamble with it, and respecking is basically free now. They lowered the price enough of respecking where, with 1 day of playing the game, you can afford basically a full respec. I think that's okay, but if they want gold to have more meaning, gamble respec and currency exchange. And the currency exchange is Borderland free. So that's that. Crafting feels really bad right now. I'm not going to go into all the detail about this. Just watch Local Hall's video yesterday. He goes into a lot of detail about why crafting feels bad. I don't agree 100% on everything that he says there, particularly what he says about bases being valuable, but he brings up some really good points, and I generally agree with most of what he says. So definitely check out his video. Crafting is just in an awful place right now. Crafting honestly feels like a big step backwards. Now, I don't want the deterministic PoE1 crafting, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. I don't want deterministic PoE1 crafting, but at the very least, let me overwrite my runes so I don't have to buy 3 new pieces of gear to balance my res when if I bought a new amulet, if I needed that 7 lightning res and I bought a new amulet, I would have to buy like a whole new pair of gloves or a whole new pair of boots because that's the only other way that I can get my res up because there's no tool. Literally, that is the only answer. There is nothing else. You can't get more res on the tree. I have the only res on the tree near me. The only thing left is gear, right? There's nothing else. Yeah, if I lost this 7% lightning res, I would have to buy a different item, which is crazy. Instead of, hey, I'm overcapped here, I'll switch this fire to lightning. Honestly, a pretty big oversight. Like if you're an SSF, you are screwed. So yeah, I don't know. I think they really need to take a look at crafting. I don't want pure deterministic. I really do think it's exciting to pick up a base, elk it, and then maybe exalt it. But I want there to be more than like, hey, I used an essence, I got a low tier cold modifier, now I trash it, right? Like that's the way this is. This no longer guarantees, all right, I'll start ranting about it. This no longer guarantees a decent cold modifier. This could be any cold modifier. It could be tier 1, which is, bad in this game. You could get tier 1 cold, tier 1 cold res, and then you get rid of the base, right? You throw away the base. So all you do is what? Like pick up amethyst bases for a day or a week, and then you use like 7 essences, and boom, they're all trash. And you throw them on the ground. Like I've only found 2 greater essences. I was spec'd into essences for a while, by the way. I had some of the points for essences, and I had these points right here, and I only have 2 greater essences. I had it for like 4 days, and I spec'd out of it because the trash. Yeah, it's bad, very, very bad. Like I get that they want to start from like the ruthless angle, but give us some interesting tools. Particularly again, like if you're not leveraging trade really, really hard, you are so screwed. And then we can talk about, trade being in a bad place because of rarity and all that. It's starting to settle a little bit, but like 90 exalts to a divine yesterday was bad. Next up, that's enough for Endgame. Again, watch Localhaul's video. Next up, the difficulty of all the portals and all that. If you're in red maps and you have a strong build, you're basically fine anyway. Like the strongest builds right now are so strong that you're basically immortal anyway. It plays like PoE1. You're just blasting. Maybe you die in 1 out of 20 maps or something. If something really, you get like a crazy rare or something. But besides that, you're just farming. Your build's online. It's fine. But I think a lot of people, like I know for me, I got 2 maps relatively early on. There wasn't much to buy on the trade economy. And I didn't have capped res at all. I think I had like 20 all res max when I got to maps. Like max, absolute max, and probably negative chaos res. And I had like a little chaos res because I had like 1 amethyst ring. It was rough. I had no tools really. I was using a freeze charm, but I could rant about charms all day. I think maybe white maps give us, I don't know, I think throw softcore players a little bit of a bone for ramping up, or give, at least give us more tools for getting our res up or something. Because yeah, beating Doriani with low res, and then you just have so few tools for trying to get that up. Maybe a couple more portals so it's not so brutal ramping to the end game. If they want to keep it to 1 portal, that's fine. But again, you lose that portal. I think it's 15 every time you die. At least it feels like it's 15. And also you lose the waystone. You lose that T15 or T16 waystone, and you lose the content that was on the map. So so that feels bad. And you have to redo the map, and many of these map layouts, Vol Factory, again, I'm not going to rant about the whole Atlas, but some of these map layouts feel so bad. And if I fail this Vol Factory, I have to, no matter what, to get up here, I'm going to have to run like a Vol Factory or go around, right? If I want to get this node, I have to run Vol Factory. That feels really bad. And if I died here, not only would I have to run it again, pretend this node isn't here, I'd have to run it again, but with no content. So I know it's a map that just has no loot in it. At low difficulty bosses, again, I'd like to see maybe multiple portals, like a 0 difficulty boss, maybe 3 portals, and then 2, and then 1, or maybe 4, 3, 2, 1 portals based on the difficulty of the boss. So as you ramp it up, you also have to like really know the boss. I went into the Arbiter of Ash totally blind, and it took me 3 days. It took me 3 days to find the citadels, and I finally went into the boss fight, went in blind. I wanted to learn it, just, raw dog it. And there was his little meteor thing that goes down, that AoE explosion. To me, that looked like don't be there, because in my head, volatile fire coming down, that's scary. So I was not there. I tried to roll out of it, and apparently you wanted to be inside of it. And so because I misread that telegraph, and in my opinion, I think that telegraph, I didn't really like what it looks like. It feels disingenuous. I lost 3 days of farming, worth about 4 divines of keys, and I lost 15% XP and all of that. And it felt really bad. And I think at least at like a low difficulty boss in a softcore experience, give me a couple portals, and then I can learn. Because I want to learn the boss fight on my own. I don't want to look it up. I don't want to see someone else do the boss fight. And if I get 1 attempt for 3 days of farming, until I have a build that I know can just kill it and be immortal or whatever, just one-shot it. And why would I try to do it in an organic way? Okay, and my primary concern right now, this is the main thing I wanted to get to today, is the future of the game and what it's going to look like. So I want to start off by saying I know all the PoE1 players are probably going to disagree with me, like vast majority of them, but that's okay. It's okay. You know, whatever a game turns into, maybe it won't be for me and maybe it's for you, and that's okay. I'm just saying what I expected and what I was looking for. So let's be mature about this, but feel free to let me know in the comments if you disagree. My hope from playing, I played all the playtests. My hope from playing all of the playtests and ExileCon and everything, and the direction the game was going, was for it to be a more methodical, interesting game, but not super stressful. I do want to call out, I find this also makes the game very stressful. Makes mapping very stressful. I don't want it to be stressful, but I do want it to be interesting. And if playing through the campaign, I was interested the entire time. The boss fights were so engaging. It was interactive. And I want the game, I know this is a very difficult balance to strike, but I want the game to be interactive and interesting without turning into PoE1. What we're seeing right now with the way that the game works, with the builds that are out there, with the way that GGG has put some balance patches out already, is the game devolving into PoE1 style, hold one button, you know, spark, whatever, hold one button, go forward, lightning arrow, the gas arrow, whatever type of stuff, maybe two buttons, and blow up the entire screen. And I think a lot of this, it has to do with the fact that, again, the monsters are playing PoE1 and we're playing PoE2. However, there are some builds that are basically PoE1 still, but a little clunkier. Like, you know, they're not as fast as, you know, self-curse, temp chains, spark, archmage, mana stacking, whatever crazy stuff in PoE1, but they're still multiple tiers above the average build. If you're just a regular Titan playing a regular build, and I think, I don't know, I was kind of hoping for a world where we get interesting build diversity and mechanics in how you play the build that has less to do with doing extreme damage. There's like the baseline of what is an average player going to do when they put together a build. They're just going to say, hey, I want to play around Fireball. I'm going to get fire damage. Maybe I understand that gem levels scale me very well, and I'm going to run like wild shards and maybe something, you know, maybe one unique that does something interesting. Like maybe I have the blue gloves that converts to cold and, you know, doing something like that. I think that's kind of like the baseline. Hey, I put together something that feels pretty good, makes sense, and that's great. And I think a build like that, but they're still going to have to dodge roll things. They're playing around. I think that should be like the baseline of can do all the content in the game and feel pretty good. I think a lot of people are going to disagree here, but what I would like is the 90th percentile, 90th, like if we talk about that as being like the 50th percentile build, I want to see like the 90th percentile. Like we can have like the 95 to 99th percentile builds be kind of cracked, but I want to see like the 90th percentile builds, which is where I put like Stormweaver Spark right now, or like Deadeye stuff, like the stuff that's doing big rarity farming, not like the broken builds right now. There's a couple like super broken builds, not those, but I would like to see the 90th percentile builds closer to the 50th percentile builds. Hey, maybe they do double the damage, but not 10x the damage. Maybe they're twice as defensive, but not 10x defensive. And I like deep build diversity and interesting mechanics there. The problem is when builds outperform like that so much, not even having to do as much with build diversity, but with mechanics diversity. More concerned with mechanics diversity than number of builds. If the 90th percentile builds degenerate to one button blow up whole screen, then I think a lot of the unique identity of Path of Exile 2 is lost. What drew me to the game being different from PoE1, you know, we see that expressed in the campaign. We see that expressed doing early bossing maps in white maps until people discovered some of these crazier builds and build mechanics. I think that really gets lost, and I understand the excitement around the extreme power fantasy. I have played very broken builds. I understand what that feels like in PoE1. I've played a full mirrored tornado shot character with a double corrupted mage blood and everything. I know what it feels like to literally one or two tap every single uber boss in the game and run with 600% movement speed. That's what PoE1 is. And I appreciate it there. I've had a ton of fun with it. What I was really hoping for was for PoE2 to be distinct from that and feel differently. What we're really seeing is these 50 percentile builds, the way they have to fight the monsters, the way it feels like a slog. Honestly, the FOMO that you get from watching, a 300, 400% rarity Stormweaver Spark character blasting. Like, I would say, me playing on Stormweaver right now, I'm probably like a 75 percentile build because I'm stuck on Chronomancer. I would 100% have respect to Stormweaver, but Chronomancer just doesn't have that access to the same power, particularly the mana sustain that Stormweaver has, that can't do the exact same thing. I'm stuck on like a 75 percentile build, and I'm probably half as good as the Stormweaver version, right? Maybe a third as good. If you took away Spark Archmage, then Chronomancer particularly is in a very tough place. You can do Hammer of the Gods shenanigans or whatever, but that's also not what I'm looking for. Take this all with a grain of salt that there's so many undiscovered things. I totally recognize that, but we're already seeing builds converge on this 1 or 2 button, full blasting, high rarity playstyle. A lot of the tools that we have in terms of like skills and abilities don't really give us too much for mechanics. Like, I do have a weapon swap blink here, but besides that, what else am I going to do except for slowly walk around and like cast a spell, right? It felt a lot more interesting anyway in the campaign, and I was hoping for very interesting bossing. Like, the way that Jonathan talked about it is, I thought bossing was going to be, hey, you make a character that's more bossing oriented. And when you looked at this, I thought if a map was going to be a boss map, I thought it was like just a big, like a boss arena, maybe even a boss rush where I fight like 3, 4, 5 bosses in a row. And maybe the average mapping build isn't that good at bossing. And, maybe I'm good at bossing. And my definition of good at bossing isn't one shot's a boss. It's is capable of dealing with the boss mechanics in an interesting way. Can that even be expressed in a game where there's this level of power fantasy? I don't know. No matter what, you have to be good at mapping to get to the boss maps anyway. So you may as well be good at mapping, and then if you're good enough at mapping, you can probably one-shot a boss anyway. And that's just kind of what it's turned into. And we're seeing lots of examples of Spark Archmage fills the screen with sparks, and then, Arbiter of Ash +4 dies, in 3 seconds. And then very importantly, if we look at the way that GGG has patched already in making things easier, I think on-death mechanics can be okay if they're very, very, very well telegraphed. But, they have those big exploding guys that take like 3, 4+ seconds to explode. That's fine. I've had rares that will just randomly do Detonate Dead from off screen. And it's just like, what are you doing? What's going on? Why is this in the game? PoE1 got rid of a lot of these, and they are repeating these mistakes. We got the rarity issue, we got all this. The way that they've patched the game already, we're seeing them kind of push the game in a PoE1 direction. I don't even know if it's possible to truly solve these problems, because the game does have plenty of problems. Solve the problems in a different way than Path of Exile 1 did. But I do know that if they solve the problems in the same way that PoE1 did, if they push, hey, we'll just give you all your flasks all the time. Hey, we'll actually just give you 42% movement speed boots and flame dash. And the game could just turn into Path of Exile 1.5. And that's okay. It'll be a great game. It will be the best ARPG of all time. If it's just PoE 1.5, it'll eclipse Path of Exile 1 in every single way. But I am very afraid that they could just continually patch the game in a way that it converges with PoE 1. I want the game to be different. I think a lot of people, particularly the Path of Exile 1 players, will be happy if it converges more with PoE 1 in terms of playstyle. If we look at the high-end play right now, it looks like clunky PoE 1. And I'm very, very afraid that it's going to be that. So there's that. I did want to end on a positive note. However, I think the most beautiful thing about PoE2 right now is that it's bringing in so many non-PoE players. People that either bounced off of PoE 1, or they looked at PoE 1 and they're like, not for me, or they just not even ARPG players in general. Or best case scenario, we get people off that D4 slop playing a good game. And it's really cool that PoE2 is doing that. So yeah, I do very much love this game. I think it's awesome. I'm excited for its future, but I'm also a little tentatively worried that it could just not learn the same lessons, or it might just not have its own direction. And I really hope that GGG takes to heart the unique vision that they had in the campaign, and they find a way to apply that in the end game, particularly with the play style and the way that we play the game. I think there are so many interesting things they could do with mechanical expression. Like, I'd love to see them, look at MOBA characters, even like look at Invoker and Meepo and whatever, and do really, really interesting things mechanically. Like, I'm not saying exactly those type of things. I'm not saying like just put Meepo in the game, but do unique things mechanically to continue to really continue to differentiate it from Path of Exile 1. Because right now you can just open up some random PoE2 streams and it looks very much like PoE 1, just a little clunkier. Anyway, I would currently give the game like a 7 out of 10 in its current state. Easily could be a 10 out of 10. For me, if it turned into PoE1 again, it just wouldn't be that. But I mean, if it turns into its own unique thing that it just like feels and looks awesome all the way through, it could be a 15 out of 10. Why not? We could just betray the fundamentals of mathematics. What'd you guys think? You guys having a good time? I do love the game. I don't want to get that misconstrued. But when it comes to criticism feedback, there's only so much that we can get out of just singing its praises. I think it's worth mentioning, of course, all the great things that it does. But there's always a long way to go. This is early access. They said they got at least like 6 to 12 more months of work on it. And I could see this shaping up to just easily be the best ARPG of all time. Worst case, it could be the second best, but I don't think they want to settle for that. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. See y'all soon. Goodbye.